Hi everyone, welcome to part 2 of Energy and Ecosystems. Today we're going to be talking about trophic pyramids and energy loss. Before you continue with the video, I'd like for you to fill in this brainstorm slide. But first, I'll go ahead and explain what that brainstorm slide includes. So if you look at this slide where it's asking for you to fill in the brainstorm, there are some green boxes for you to write in, and at the top there's a quote. And the quote says, 300 trout are needed to support one person for a year. This makes sense that in a year you would eat at least one fish a day, maybe even more. The trout, in turn, must consume 90,000 frogs. That's to feed 300 trout for a year. They have to eat all those frogs. The frogs, for 90,000 frogs to stay alive, you'd have to provide them with 27 million grasshoppers over the course of a year. And those grasshoppers to grow would need about 1,000 tons of grass, so fields and fields of grass. So one way to think about it is to support you and how much you eat, there needs to be fields and fields of grass. Some things to think about as we get started. Why do you have to keep eating? Why don't we just take the food in our body and keep recycling it and processing it over and over again? If you laid out all the food you eat in 1 year, is it more or less than the energy currently in your body? So think about all the food you eat in a week, and then all the weeks in a year. If you stacked all that food on a table or in your living room, how big would that pile be? And would it be bigger or smaller than your body? Where does our extra energy go? Why do we need to keep eating? So go ahead and go fill in that brainstorm slide, pause the video, and when you're done, come back and we'll keep talking about energy. So last video we talked about food chains and we showed you how the energy moves. So it starts off in the sun as solar energy. Through photosynthesis, the producers or plants capture it, and then the producers are eaten by the primary consumers. They store it as chemical energy. The primary consumers are eaten by secondary consumers and then tertiary consumers, and eventually all of those things get decomposed, so some of the energy goes into decomposers. Now, this food chain or food web is correct, but it is incomplete. It doesn't show where most of the energy goes. So where does most of our energy go, and why do you have to keep eating? In our daily lives, we move, we eat, we breathe, we make cells, fight viruses, emit waste, all of those things. And this takes energy to do. 90% of the energy that we eat is lost as heat, waste, and cellular respiration or metabolism. And you can feel this in body warmth. So if you feel the skin on your body, you can feel the energy that your cells are using up and releasing into the air around you. The only time your body warmth drops substantially is when you die and your cells stop doing those processes. So when you think about the body of you or any animal or plant, only about 10% of the energy we eat is stored. So this is showing a cow that's eating, that's 100% of its energy. It's only going to store about 10%. 30% is going to leave as respiration or breathing, 50% as body heat, and 10% as excreted waste. So this food web doesn't show us where most of the energy goes. To show us where most of the energy goes, we need to add in some arrows, these red arrows here, to show the energy, 90% of that energy leaving our ecosystem as heat. So 90% of the energy leaves as heat, only 10% of the energy is passed on. So the plant captures energy, but it uses up 90% to grow and respire and breathe and fight viruses. Only 10% of its energy goes to the rabbit. The rabbit has energy, but it uses 90% of its energy to move around, to dig burrows, to mate, to escape predators, and only 10% of its energy is going to get passed on to this hawk. Similarly, the hawk uses up energy flying, building nests, feeding its young. Only 10% of its energy would be passed on to anything that eats the hawk. To show how energy moves, we use something called a trophic pyramid. So we're going to start at the bottom and we're going to build up. This bottom part right here has producers, and it says producers capture energy from the sun. So we're going to look at the ecosystem, and maybe this field of producers is about the size of the field that's just north of the high school. And in this field, we're going to say that plants absorb 10,000 calories from the sun. Remember, calories is just a way to measure energy. Producers are plants, and they capture the sun's energy, and they store it in carbohydrates and other molecules. So we have the sun. These producers, the plants, have stored 10,000 calories as carbohydrates in their body. But we just said that producers use up 90% of their energy. The producers aren't 100% efficient. Plants grow, produce waste, fight viruses. Plants use up 90% of their energy to do these things. This process is called metabolism or cellular respiration. So to find out how many calories they lose, we're going to take 90%, that's how much energy they lose, times 10,000 of the calories that they had, and that gives us 9,000 calories as energy loss. So here I've added an arrow showing that 9,000 calories of energy is lost. So we started with 10,000 calories. 9,000 calories of energy is lost from cellular metabolism and respiration. So 10,000 minus 9,000, that would leave us with 1,000 for the rabbits. So now we've added rabbits, and the primary consumers get 1,000 calories. Now these rabbits, the primary consumers, are going to use up 90% of their energy. Primary consumers aren't 100% efficient. They grow, produce waste, fight viruses, etc. They use up 90% of their energy doing these things in metabolism or cellular respiration. So we have the rabbits, and they're worth 1,000 calories, but again, 90% or 9,000 calories of their energy is going to be lost. So now in terms of how much energy can stay in the ecosystem, we have 1,000 minus 900, and we're only going to have 100 calories left. Secondary consumers, we've added the snakes, only get 10% of the primary consumer's energy. So snakes eat the rabbits. The snake only gets 10% of the rabbit's original energy. So when I'm calculating this, I'm saying 10,000 of the 1,000 calories in the primary consumers gives us 100 calories in the secondary consumers. So at the snakes, you can see that there's 100 kilocalories or calories at their level. Now we're going to add on a third level, but before we do this, we have to think about how much energy the snakes have lost. So secondary consumers use up 90% of their energy. The snakes aren't 100% efficient. They grow, produce waste, fight viruses. They use up 90% of their energy doing these things in metabolism or cellular respiration. So here we have 100 calories for the snake, but they're going to lose 90% or 90 calories as heat. So by the time we get up to the tertiary consumers, the hawks, they're only going to get 10% of the secondary consumer's energy. So hawks are going to eat the snakes, but hawks only get 10% of the snake's original energy. 10% of 100 calories in secondary consumers is 10 calories in the tertiary consumers. So if we look up here at the hawks, we only have 10 calories. So why is energy loss a problem, especially for the hawk? So think about, at the producers in grass, we had 10,000 calories stored. We lost 90% or 9,000 calories. The rabbits had 1,000 calories stored. They lost 90% or 900 calories. The snakes had 100 calories stored. They lost 90% or 900 calories. So we keep losing energy as we go up until there's only 10 calories left for the hawk. Why would all this energy loss be a problem, especially for the hawk? Is there enough food for the hawk? And what will the hawk have to do? So thinking about this, I kept the numbers a little smaller so that they would be easier to manage, but 100 calories is about the amount of calories you would get in a boiled egg or an apple. So 10 calories is definitely not enough to feed a hawk. In order for one hawk to survive, it would need much more than that field to support it. it would need maybe 10 of those fields to support it, so that then there would be more rabbits and more snakes just to support one hawk. If you have a family of hawks, you need an even bigger area to support them. Now, something that the hawk can do that many other animals do is that most consumers can eat at many levels of the food chain. So instead of just relying on snakes, because there's not that many calories in snakes, the hawks can also eat the rabbits, and they can also eat the grasshoppers. So when you look at this and we show all the arrows of what they can eat, it starts to look complicated. Snakes don't just eat rabbits. Snakes could eat grasshoppers. They could also eat lizards. Why would it be important to diversify your diet as an animal? Why, if you're working in an ecosystem like this, would you want to be able to eat many things instead of just one thing? Think about how populations of prey can increase or decrease because disease, drought, fire, floods, human activity. Why would it be best for the hawk to survive if it could eat not just rabbits, but snakes, lizards, maybe even the occasional grasshopper? How would that help the hawk to survive? So this model is called a trophic pyramid. And when you have all these levels, we have producers on the bottom, primary consumers on the next level, secondary consumers on the next level, and tertiary consumers on the final level. Now, we can measure how big these levels are in calories as energy. We can also measure these levels in terms of biomass. So biomass is a more important measure than just the number of organisms. If there are billions of blades of grass, it's not helpful to count them all because one blade of grass is not the same as one hawk. So we don't usually count individual organisms. Instead, we measure energy or the biomass instead of the number of organisms. And biomass is the dry weight for the tissue found in each trophic level, and this is measured in kilograms or kg. So instead of putting 10,000 calories to store for carbohydrates, we could say 10,000 kilograms of producers. There's 1,000 kilograms of rabbits, 100 kilograms of snakes, and 10 kilograms of hawks. So biomass is another way that we can measure how much of each organism is at each level without having to count the individual organisms. So now you're going to be making your own trophic pyramid.